My name is Ren Aldinger, and I am 39 years old. 5 Saturdays after I turned the key for the first time in the first print shop I had ever owned, a Pacifica rolled up my gravel lane and Edith climbed out with her 2 kids, 2 suitcases, and a grin like the last 3 years had never happened, the same sister who had sat in the witness chair at my divorce trial and spoken for my ex-husband in a flat voice I could still hear if I stood very still. I had worked myself to the bone to afford that gravel, that composing bench, that deed. The one name on that deed, and on the sign above the door, is mine. What Edith said on my porch that morning was bold enough. But what my family did 12 days later, on a Sunday I am still trying to set type around in my head, is the part I am not finished with. Welcome back to Bound Edition Stories. This channel is where women who built a life back up from whatever they had left under the press share what the pages cost and what they refused to throw out. If you have ever been the one who finished everybody else's copy just to earn the right to keep working on your own, drop the word stitch in the comments, and stick with me because this one starts at a press bed, runs through a witness chair, and ends on a porch. And every galley in that shop was proofed twice. To see how a sister ends up on the wrong side of a courthouse, you have to go back 4 years, to a kitchen table where I was 35 and believed I was a partner. My husband Cale owned Marsh Letterpress, a working press room and bindery on the upper floor of a brick building on Bank Street in Hadley, Vermont, in the foothills east of Montpelier. I say he owned it, and that is the whole story right there. The press sat inside an LLC Cale had registered 3 years before our wedding at a desk in Burlington with a check for $850 to the Secretary of State. I ran the front of the shop, the design consultations, the wedding invite clients, the university binding contract that came to us because the head of special collections trusted me, and the whole town knew it. Cale ran the Vandercook proof press and the Klug foil press on the heavy side. He did the hand binding on the luxury orders. I did everything else. 3 times I asked Cale to add my name to the paperwork. 3 times he chuckled and said later this year. He had a laugh that could talk a Vermont bride into a 600 letterpress monogram she did not need. I signed 12 years of my life away to that press, one ink-stained afternoon at a time, and my name never made it onto a single page that mattered. There was a safe in the back office. Cale kept the combination taped under a shelf the way some men keep a second phone, close and quiet and just for him. I told myself every marriage has a locked drawer somewhere. That was the lie I could afford back then. The shop smelled like oil-based ink and dried lavender sachets from the bridal books, and I loved it the way you love a press you did not get to christen. Looking back, the warning signs stacked up like a galley nobody wanted to proof. I proofed everything else leaving that room. The one set of pages I never got to mark up was on my own husband. Here is what you need to know about my family, and I will keep it short because it is not pretty. My dad, Ezra Aldinger, dropped dead of a heart attack at his Vandercook when I was 19 and Edith was 12. He was a printer by day and a binder by night, and the only man I ever knew who asked me what I wanted. He had a bench in the back of our kitchen on Granny Creek Road and a brass composing stick he had bought used the year I was born. After the funeral, my mother Rowan went dark for about a year. The kind of dark where the post goes unopened. So I quit the printing program I had started at UVM, took a job at a quick print counter in Burlington, and became the family's load-bearing wall. I paid for Edith's point classes when she was 13. I paid the deposit on her wedding dress when she was 22. Rowan had a phrase she used like a grace every time Edith stumbled, and I caught it. "You stitch it tight, Ren." She said it the way you would read a label on a machine, like it was embossed on me by the maker. I remember handing Edith the money for that dress, money I had earned stamping envelopes at the quick print counter on Pine Street. She took it without looking up and said, "You will be fine. You are always fine." She was 22. She had already learned the family math. Fine was my job title. I mistook being needed for being loved. And I want to be honest with you, I kept making that mistake for a long time. It had a price tag on it the whole while. I just had not been handed the invoice yet. Dad's composing stick came to me because nobody else wanted to carry it. I carried it everywhere I went for 20 years. Some people inherit money. I inherited the tool you set other people's words in, and a family that thought the setting came free. Marriages have warning lights, same as presses, and mine started flashing the fall I turned 35. Cale's phone began sleeping face down. There were trips on Thursday nights that came back with no client. He smelled like a perfume shop we did not deliver to. I am a printer. I do not ignore an off-register line. I trace it back to the source. So I drove past the perfumery on Route 100 on a Thursday and saw his truck parked behind it next to a forest green Subaru that belonged to Madeleine, the events designer who had flirted with him at every bridal expo since the year we registered the LLC. I sat there long enough to be sure, then went home and asked him straight. At our own kitchen table. No shouting. He did not even bother to deny it. He set down his coffee cup like a man closing a deal and said, "Let us keep this professional, Ren. No need to dismantle the shop." The shop. His first thought was, the shop. And mine should have been too, because a week later I found the safe hanging open. Cale was careless when he was distracted, and I read what was inside, the company papers, older than our marriage, his name alone, bank statements for an account I had never seen, with steady money walking out of the press into a property labeled Unit 7B, Meriden Line. We had not built, finished, or restocked so much as a type drawer in 3 years. I stood in that office with the press idling and understood I was not reading a husband's paperwork. I was reading an exit plan, and it had been in motion while I was still ordering his birthday cake. I photographed nothing, took nothing. I just closed the safe and started making a list in my head of everything in that building my hands had handset and my name had never touched. I hired a lawyer the next week, a small office woman named Halloran, with reading glasses on a beaded chain, who did not sugarcoat. She laid it out plain. The press was premarital property, his company, his name. My path was to prove what the law calls active appreciation, that the business had grown in value during the marriage because of my work. 12 years of design contracts, university jobs, paper stock I had stretched. We could show all of it if the right people inside the shop backed me up. Margaret Vellis, the bookkeeper Cale had pushed out the year before, was on my list. So was Edith. My sister had worked the front desk for 2 years after her first layoff, scheduling weddings I paid her to schedule. She had seen who ran that studio. Halloran said family witnesses read well with judges, and I remember feeling something almost like relief. Meanwhile, Cal moved like a man who had rehearsed. My login to the design software died on a Tuesday. The locks got changed on a Friday, and my key to a building I had opened at 6 in the morning for a decade turned into a souvenir. The Meriden Line account Halloran's forensic accountant found had been feeding cash somewhere soft and hard to trace for over 2 years. Every move I made by the book. I did not take $1. I wanted to win clean, because clean was the only thing I had left that was fully mine. Then Halloran called me on a gray afternoon in March. The other side had filed their witness list, and she read the names slow, and there was one she read twice. My sister's name. On his list. I stood in that rented kitchen, holding the phone, listening to the dryer thump, doing the math and refusing the answer. The hearing room in the Washington County Courthouse had fluorescent lights and carpet the color of old gum. That is where my little sister set me in type and pulled the press. Edith wore a navy dress with a ruched waist and did not look at me once from the witness chair. She said under oath that I had always called the shop Cale's business, that I referred to myself as an employee, that I was, her words, impulsive with money, and she had heard me complain about my own reckless spending. She delivered it in the flat voice of somebody reading a script practiced in a front hall mirror, and 12 years of my work turned into a paycheck I should be grateful for. Halloran objected where she could. It did not matter much. A family witness reads well with judges, remember. It reads well in both directions. My mother, Rowan, sat in the gallery that day and sat on Edith's side of the aisle, purse in her lap, eyes forward like she was at a church service she did not love, but would not dream of leaving. During recess, I caught up with Edith by the vending machines in the hallway. I did not yell. I asked her one thing: why? She looked at the candy bars, at the buttons on the wall, anywhere that was not me. Then she gave me the answer she had been giving me since she was 14. "You stitch it tight, Wren. You always do." I stood there with quarters in my hand, and I finally heard that sentence for what it was. It was not faith in me. It was a permission slip signed by everyone I loved to take whatever I had, because the stitching woman regrows what you cut from her. That is what they all believed. I had believed it too. And the bill for believing it was about to come due. The ruling came down in early June. The press was Cale's, premarital, untouchable. My active appreciation claim, gutted by my own sister's testimony, was settled with a buyout of $46,000. 12 years, $46,000. Round it to $10.50 a day. I did the math one night and wished I had not. The apartment over the shop went with him. His name on the lease. His landlord friend happy to keep him. I was given 2 weeks to collect my personal property from the shop. I took one thing: my father's composing stick. Every inch of it had been fitted by Ezra Aldinger the year I was born, and there was an old vendor's invoice in the proof drawer with the name Aldinger on it. So even Cale's lawyer could not pretend otherwise. I rolled the stick in a quilted moving blanket across that loading dock on a Tuesday morning, while 2 finishers I had trained pretended to be cleaning rollers. Cale stood in the door of Bay 1 with his coffee, comfortable as a man who had just handset a winning run. When I got to my pickup, he raised his cup and said, "No hard feelings, Wren." I ran the stick up the ramp, strapped it down, drove off, and did not give him the mirror check he had been fishing for. That night my mother finally called. I sat on a mattress on a floor and let it ring twice before I answered, and I will admit part of me still expected her to ask where I was sleeping. She did not ask. She said Edith had been through so much with Finn's debts, and the family needed to heal now. And then she said the sentence she would carry to every disaster that came after. "Do not make this into a war, Wren. Your sister is also struggling." Struggling. I looked around the room at everything I owned, and it fit against one wall. I rented a room above the Hadley Coin Laundry on the highway strip, the kind of place where the dryers thump under your floor until 11 at night like a heartbeat you did not ask for. On the first night, I sat down with a legal pad and made an inventory, because inventories are how I calm down. 1 composing stick, $46,000, 2 hands with 22 years of ink in them, 0 debts, 0 people I owed a single explanation to as of that afternoon. I blocked Cale's number, my mother, and Edith. I did not block. I just stopped answering. And if you have never felt the difference, it is the difference between slamming a door and simply not standing in doorways anymore. 4th item on the pad, and I wrote it slow in capital letters, like a work order. The next thing I build will have one name on it. I am telling you this part plainly because I know how it sounds. It sounds cold. Where I come from, a woman who stops picking up is a scandal, and a man who empties a marriage through a side property is just business-minded. I had spent 16 years being the net under everyone's high-wire act. The net does not get a turn on the wire, so I folded the net. 3 years. That is what it took. And I am going to walk you through those years quickly because they were not dramatic. They were just heavy. But I want you to notice one thing as we go. The whole time I believed distance was the same thing as safety. I believed if I built far enough away from my family, what I built would be safe from them. I was wrong about that. Here is what rebuilding actually looks like for anyone who has had to do it. It looks like a 9-year-old cargo van I bought at auction for $3,800 and brought back to life on a Sunday with my dad's tool roll. I lettered the side myself. Aldinger Press. 1 woman, fair rates. Days I drove that van to driveways and church parking lots and restored what mothers could not afford to send out. Antique typewriter ribbons for a 1920s Underwood. A hymnal binding so old its owner apologized for handing it over. a clockwork music box whose owner had been told by 3 shops it could not be fixed. Nights, 4 shifts a week at the quick print counter in Burlington, walking concrete until 2 in the morning. Sundays after service let out I did repair jobs for widows at half the shop rate, and those women paid me back in a currency Cale never understood. They talked. Word of the honest bookbinder lady spread through Hadley faster than any ad I could have bought. The university manager called me himself and said their work had gone downhill since I left Marsh Letterpress and moved the whole $70,000 a year binding contract to my van. I slept 5 hours a night. I ate lunch sitting on a milk crate. I taped a savings goal to the dashboard and watched the number climb like a patient watching her own monitor. People ask why I did not just move away and start over somewhere nobody knew my name. Because Hadley was my town too. I had earned every rag of shop towel there, and I was not going to let the people who took the press take the map. If you have ever refused to be the one who leaves, tell me in the comments. I read them. Stick around because the hardest part of this story was not the work. The work was simple. The hard part drove up my gravel 3 years later, wearing my sister's face. Anyway, on a wet Tuesday in my second year, a delivery van died on the shoulder of Route 100, and stopping for it changed my whole life. The dead wrecker belonged to Howard Miles, a 4-press residential bindery on the west edge of town that had been there since before I was born. Behind the wheel sat Howard himself, 74 years old, flannel shirt, hands like old dried-out rollers. His clutchmaster cylinder had cooked itself. I had one in the van, swapped it on the shoulder in the rain, and when he asked what he owed me, I quoted him the part plus 20 minutes of labor, exact. He looked at the invoice longer than the job took. Most people pad a bill for a stranded old man or wave it to look like a saint. An honest number apparently reads like hymn lines. The next week he called and offered me weekend bays at his shop. Overflow work, no strings. Miles's press room was worn but solid, the kind of press room where the foot treadle is older than the apprentice and nothing important is broken. Howard had buried his wife 2 springs back. No kids in the trade. He moved slower than he wanted to and watched me work the way old printers watch, saying nothing, missing nothing. On the office wall, next to a calendar from a type foundry that went under in the 70s, hung a little handset pine board, the typeface gone amber. Read the fine print. I asked him about it once. He said his father said it the week the press opened, and that it had cost the family some friends and saved the business about a dozen bankruptcies. I wrote nothing down. Did not need to. Some sentences go into you like a press-fit pin seated true, and you only find out later they are holding the whole assembly together. Howard started calling me on Tuesdays about jobs that stumped his young finisher, Magdalene. Then he started calling me on Tuesdays about nothing. I did not know yet that the old man was interviewing me. He knew. The truth about my sister found me on a loading dock at 11 at night, the way truth does, off-duty and unannounced. Margaret Vellis, Cale's old bookkeeper, had taken a desk job at the quick print counter in Burlington. One slow shift, we ended up stacking paper stocks side by side. She asked how I was holding up. Then she went quiet in a way that had weight to it and said there was something that had been sitting wrong with her for 2 years. 2 weeks before my trial, she had still had access to the shop's accounts, tail end of her notice period. She watched Cale cut a check for $15,000 against a credit line, and she heard him on the phone with Finn Marchetti, my sister's husband, telling him their pickup debt was handled and there would be another check after things settled down. Cale called it keeping the family tidy. Margaret said she would have come forward at the time, except she had signed papers on her way out and needed her pension, and she was ashamed anyway. And I told her the truth, that it would not have been admissible and would not have mattered. What mattered was arithmetic. My sister's loyalty had a sticker price, $15,000, roughly what I had paid out for her across all those years of point classes and wedding deposits and bailouts, and Cale had simply bought the asset out from under me like a man picking up a defaulted piano. I clocked out, sat in my van in the lot for a while with my hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, and then went back in and finished the shift because the orders do not print themselves. At the door, Margaret touched my sleeve and lowered her voice like the boxes were listening. "And between us," she said, "he never mailed the second check. I want you to remember that detail. It is a load-bearing detail. It comes back." Through all 3 of those years, my mother kept a voicemail campaign running with the discipline of a utility company. I saved some of them, not for evidence, there was no case to build, just so I would stop wondering later if I had imagined the pattern. Not one message asked where I was living, not one asked if I was eating, sleeping, making it. They asked things of me. "Thanksgiving is at Viv's and it will look wrong if you are not there. Your sister asks about you," which I knew the way you know a galley is broken, by checking, because Edith's public life rolled on without a hitch and none of it ever rolled my way. And the big one, delivered in my mother's church voice. "Family is what is left when everything else has been taken, Wren. My mother is not a monster, and I need you to hear that because this story does not work if you sort her into the monster bin. She was raised by a woman who took in her brothers every time they fell, and she took in her own brother Dale's girl for 2 years in the 90s. In her arithmetic, the strong lift, the falling forever, no invoice, and the lifting is what the word family means. She was not asking me for anything she had not paid herself. That is what made it so hard to hate her and so necessary to stay away from her. Every October, a birthday card still came to my P.O. box, Rowan's handwriting getting a little shakier, a $20 bill folded inside like I was still 12. I kept every card. I mailed every $20 back. You can love people from a distance. You can survive. That is a thing I learned above a laundromat, and I would say it got easier. Except it never got easier. It just got quieter. Then Howard Miles decided to retire, and the quiet ended. He told me on a Tuesday over coffee from his ancient percolator that his nephew had filed their notice and he was listing the property in the spring. Press room plus the 2-bedroom house on the same lot, the one he and his wife had lived in for 40 years, 30 steps from Bay 1 across a gravel yard. The realtor said $295,000 for the package. Howard watched me absorb the number, then said the thing I still hear in his voice before it went public. "You want it. It is yours to earn." His terms were simple and not soft. He would carry a note himself for $125,000, 10 years at 6%, because he wanted the press room to stay a press room, and he had decided I was the one who would keep it one. The rest was mine to raise. I had $92,000. The 46 from the settlement I had never let myself touch, and 46 more that 3 years of double shifts had stacked up $100 at a time. I took my books to the local bank, the one that still knows its customers by their pickup trucks, and I brought the university binding contract with me and a folder of 3 years of mobile bindery income that surprised the loan officer into sitting up straighter. They covered the gap. Every number added. Nobody did me any favors, and if you think I am walking you through the math to brag, I am not. I am walking you through it because in about 20 minutes of this story, a group of people are going to stand on that gravel and tell me none of this counts. The night before closing, I lay awake till 3, and it was not the debt keeping my eyes open. For 20 years I had had nothing anyone could take. Now there would be something. Having something is its own kind of fear. Closing day was a Friday morning in September in a title office with bad landscape paintings and wonderful coffee. 11 signatures. I counted them the way you count galleys because sequence matters and so do endings. And then the deed printed plain as a paper stock label, and on the owner line one name, Wren Aldinger. Not a company Cale built before a wedding, not a lease under someone else's friend. One name, mine, on land and walls and a roof, recorded at the county for anyone to look up until long after I am gone. Howard shook my hand once hard, the way you would seat a forme, and gave me both sets of keys on a plain steel ring. That afternoon, I did the only ceremony I cared about. I backed the van up to Bay 1, dropped the ramp, and rolled my father's composing stick across the concrete to the left-hand corner, the same corner he had kept it in at the house on Granny Creek Road when I was a girl standing on a milk crate to watch him work. 20 years that stick had been in exile, garages and rented rooms and the back of a van. I set the bench dogs with my boot and stood there in the empty press room with my hand flat on the stick for a while. And if you had walked in, you would have thought I was calibrating it. That night I slept on an air mattress in the middle of the empty living room. No curtains yet, moonlight all over the floor, and I listened to the furnace tick and the gravel settle, the sounds of a building talking to its owner. Its owner. I got 5 Saturdays of that feeling. 5 Saturdays is what the world gave me before it came up the driveway to renegotiate, and I want to be fair to the world. That is 5 more than it had ever given me before. The sign went up on a Monday. Aldinger Press, Bindery, invitations, books. And under it, smaller, the line every woman in the trades will recognize as a dare. Ren Aldinger, owner. The first week ran exactly like every woman who has worked a counter is expecting me to say it ran. A bride in a sequoia asked to speak to the owner, and I wiped my hands on a rag and handed her my card and watched her mental software update in real time. To her credit, it did update. 2 callers asked when the real binder would be in. I kept Magdalene on, Howard's young finisher, 24 years old, good hands, bad guess diagnosis habit. I had been sanding her off 1 work order at a time. Howard himself came by every Tuesday at 10 like a scheduled maintenance item, bought coffee from the machine with exact change though the coffee was free for him forever, sat in his old chair by the window, and offered no advice at all unless I asked for it, which is the rarest form of love I have personally encountered. First month's revenue covered the mortgage, the note to Howard, paper stock, Magdalene, and insurance with about enough left over for a pizza. No miracle. A margin. Margins are all I have ever asked for. Before opening, I had found his father's little hand-painted board in a drawer where Howard left it, wrapped in a shop towel like a relic, and I understood the message the way he intended it. I put a frame around it and hung it behind the register where you cannot miss it while you are paying. Read the fine print. A customer asked me if it was some kind of religious thing. I told her closest thing I have got. She laughed. I was not entirely joking, and I would find out soon just how much I was not joking. News in a town like Hadley does not travel through papers, it travels through open doors. A library patron dropping off a folio told me 2 of Marsh's best binders had walked out over bounced paychecks. A paper rep, the chatty one, mentioned Cale's account had gone cash on delivery, which in our world is the sound of a heart monitor slowing down. The university contract, mine now, had been the spine of that press room's cash flow, and I knew better than anyone what its leaving would do, because I was the one who had kept the paper trail clean all those years. Madeline's green Subaru, I heard, was last seen headed out of town in the spring. I did not celebrate any of it, and I want to be precise about why, because this matters to how the story ends. A man drowning is not my victory. It is just water finding its level. And I had bays full of work and no time to stand on the bank watching. The other piece of news came through the family channel, Viv to my mother to the church lobby to me, the way all official family news travels. Finn had left Edith, gone to Texas for a job that may or may not have existed, leaving her the minivan, the kids, and a mortgage 3 months behind. And here's the part that closed a loop I had been holding open since a loading dock 2 years before. The card debt, the famous $15,000 of loyalty money, had never been finished off. Cale's second check never came. The balance had been growing teeth the whole time, and a collection agency owned it now. The loyalty my sister sold me out for turned out to be a bounced promise from a man who bounced everything eventually. I found out on a Thursday. Bad news travels at the speed of family. By Saturday, my phone lit up with a name it had not shown in 3 years. The first text said, "Heard about the shop, so proud of you, sis." Exclamation points like confetti, we should catch up, nothing in it about a courtroom, nothing about a navy dress in a witness chair, 3 years of silence, and she opens with pride, as if pride were hers to hand out over what I had built in the crater she helped dig. I read it standing at the register under Howard's little board, and I did not answer it. The second text came 5 days later. Mom says the house has 2 bedrooms? Bet it is beautiful. And there it is. I thought, there is the tape measure, because that is not a compliment, that is an appraisal. And I had been reading Edith's appraisal since she was 16 years old. I typed out an answer that was all lowercase hurt. Deleted it. Typed a colder one, a lawyer's answer. Deleted that too. I must have written her a dozen replies over 2 nights, sitting at my kitchen table in the house with one name on the deed, and every version was me explaining myself. And somewhere past midnight, I finally understood that explaining myself was the family's oldest tax on me, and I was not filing anymore. I put the phone face down. I would love to tell you I slept mostly. I lay there listening to my own house hold its breath. People will tell you boundaries feel empowering sometimes. Mostly they feel like standing very still in work boots, waiting to find out what it costs. This time, the 5th Saturday after closing, mid-morning, I was under a Heidelberg Platen in Bay 1 with a stubborn ink duct when I heard tires come off the road onto my gravel. Slow and certain, a vehicle that knew it had arrived somewhere it planned to stay. I knew the engine before I saw the paint. A Pacifica with a tired belt squeal I would have fixed for free back when we were still sisters. Edith came out of the driver's seat already performing, sunglasses up into her hair, arms wide at the property like a game show hostess. "Oh my gosh, look at this place." Theo slid out after her, 8 years old, all elbows, and little Mabry, 5, dragging a backpack with a unicorn on it, and the sight of those kids put a hook in my chest. I want to be honest about that because none of what was coming was their doing. Then I saw the rest. 2 suitcases on the gravel, trash bags with sleeves pressed against the plastic, the luggage of a fast exit and strapped to the roof rack, a folded rollaway mattress under a blue tarp. She had not come to ask me a question. She had come with the answer packed. She was up my porch steps while I was still wiping ink off my knuckles, talking the whole way. The words rehearsed in the smooth way that only sounds casual if nobody's listening closely. And I have spent 3 years listening closely. The kids can share the second bedroom. They are good sleepers. I will take the couch till we figure something out. It is temporary, obviously. Then she turned on the top step, taking in my yard, my shop, my roof line, and she delivered the line she had clearly written on the drive over, the one that was supposed to end the conversation before it started. "We are family, Wren, and you have all this now. You have all this." There is a whole religion inside that sentence, and I was raised in it, and I know every hymn. What is yours exists to be allocated. The strong one is a public utility. Mabry waved at me from the gravel, shy, both hands around the strap of her unicorn backpack, and I waved back at her because my quarrel has never once been with children. Then I looked at my sister and told her the truth. "No, Edith, you cannot live here." I said it the way I quote a price on a custom job: level, priced, final. She blinked like I had spoken a foreign language, and honestly, in our family, I had. Then she ran through her gears and I stood on my own porch and watched every one of them come. First gear, sugar. Sisters help sisters. Remember when we shared a room. The kids adore you. Second gear, guilt. And she reached for it smooth as a downshift. They are sleeping in a motel, Wren. Look at them. Look at their faces. I did look. That is the terrible mechanics of it. She aimed her own children at me like a clutch lever. And then, third gear, the old reliable, the family's national anthem, half shouted from my top step, with her hand thrown toward my house. You will be fine. You are always fine. So what does it even matter to you? There it was, 20 years old, handing back my point money, 22 in a courtroom hallway, and now on my porch, the same sentence. Because it had never once failed her before. I felt something settle in me, quiet as a wheel bearing finally seated true. You can earn a place here. You cannot claim one. She stared at me. I do not think she understood it. Not then. It was not in any language our family spoke. She called me selfish. She said, "Mom was right about you." Which told me exactly what the drive over had sounded like. She loaded the kids back in, Mabry still waving at me through the glass. God help me. And reversed down my gravel fast enough to spray it, and I stood there and listened to that belt squeal fade toward Route 9. I checked my watch. I remember thinking with no humor at all that the phone call to my mother would be connected before she cleared the county road. It took less than 2 days for the family to mobilize, and I say family, and mean the whole apparatus: blood, marriage, church pew, and grocery aisle. My mother called first, and her opening line had clearly been drafted in committee. "I did not raise you to shut a door on babies," Aunt Viv called next. Viv, who had not dialed my number since my divorce, to inform me that everyone at First Methodist was asking about it. Everyone. And what was she supposed to tell people? A man calling himself my cousin Roy, who I last saw at a funeral in another decade, left a voicemail that opened with, "Hey stranger," and landed on, "You know she has got those kids." At the Natural Food Coop on Main, two women from my mother's Bible study looked at me the way you look at a binding job parked across two copies of the same book. One of my regular customers canceled an appointment, personal reasons, and did not rebook. And I want you to notice the same thing I noticed standing in my shop at closing time, phone buzzing itself sideways across the counter. In all of it, every call, every message, every casserole warm voice, no one, not one single person, asked why Edith had lost her house. No one asked where Finn was, or what the debt was, or how it got that big, or what she planned to do next. The only question the entire network wanted answered was why I would not hand over mine. The strong one's no is the only scandal the system recognizes. If you have ever been that person, the one whose refusal causes more outrage than everyone else's chaos, put the words strong in the comments because I read them and it matters to me that we can see each other. Then keep listening, because on Wednesday night on a delivery run, I drove past the First Methodist parking lot, and what I saw parked in the far corner under the security light took every bit of anger I had and bent it into something more complicated. It was the Pacifica backed into the corner of the church lot under the light, the way you park when the vehicle is the address. The rear windows were packed to the glass, laundry baskets, the rolled mattress, a lamp lying on its side like something that had given up. The dome light was on. Theo sat in the open side door doing homework on the lid of a cooler, workbook tilted toward the security light. Mabry was asleep across the middle seats with her arms around that unicorn backpack. Edith sat in the driver's seat, forehead against the wheel, not crying that I could see, just parked in every sense a person can be. I pulled over across the road and sat in the dark with my engine off for about 10 minutes, and I am going to tell you exactly what I saw because it is the reason the rest of this story goes the way it goes. I did not see a liar getting what she deserved, although she was one and she was. I saw the finished product of the factory we both came off of. They had built me into a stitcher and never once asked what the stitcher could carry. They had built her into a package that was always supposed to be carried and never taught her to stand. And then the men who had promised to carry her, Finn, Cale, the whole handshaking lot of them, had set her down on the pavement and driven off. Her loyalty had been bought with a check that bounced. Now the bill was sleeping in a minivan. In the morning I called Pastor Henry, told him a family in the congregation wanted to cover a week at the Hadley Inn plus grocery cards for a young mother in trouble and to keep the name out of it. And I meant every word of the anonymity. That night I understood the difference between helping someone and being consumed by them. One is a gift, the other is a toll. That Friday, as if the universe were running a clearance sale on my past, Cale Marsh walked into my shop. Thinner, grayer at the temples, handshake still calibrated to sell you something. He did a slow lap of my waiting room like an appraiser, complimented the floors, complimented the coffee machine, and then pitched me. And I will give him this. The man could still pitch standing in the rubble. He had heard great things. He still had the Marsh name, the Bank Street location, decades of goodwill, and I had his word, the talent, partnership like old times but official this time, and he actually winked on the word official. Years too late. Somewhere mid-pitch, the truth fell out of his pocket. The bank was moving on his building, and the pitch was a man grabbing for a rope and calling it a merger. I let him finish. 19-year-old me would have already been drawing up how to save him. 35-year-old me would have at least felt the pull. 39-year-old me wiped down the counter and said, "I have a shop. It is not for sharing. You taught me that, and it is the one thing I owe you." He tried the grin, asked if I would at least front him paper on credit. Buddy rates, us being history and all. I pointed at the little board behind my register, at Howard's father's amber paint. Read the fine print. He read it twice like it might soften on the second pass. Then he called me cold, which from Cale is practically a diploma, and walked out to his truck. I noticed he was careful to park where I could not see the plates. I felt nothing I would need to confess. That night at 9, my phone buzzed once. My mother, a single line, no greeting. Sunday, we are all coming to talk some sense into you. Tuesday's coffee with Howard happened on Saturday that week because I called him, which I had never once done for a non-mechanical problem. He came in his church supper cardigan and sat in his chair and listened to the whole thing without moving. Then I asked him the question that had been idling under everything for 3 years. Am I cruel, Howard? He thought about it the way he thinks about a noise you can only hear in 4th gear, long enough that you start to worry. Then he said, I sold you this place because you pay what things cost. Cruel is teaching somebody the world owes them rent. He rinsed his cup, put it in the rack, and left me with that. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad because inventories are how I calm down, and I wrote out what I could actually give without setting myself on fire to reheat the family casserole. I needed counterhelp. That was simply true. Magdalene and I were drowning in wedding invoice paperwork every Friday. So, item 1, a job. 25 hours a week at Aldinger Press, front desk, posted wage, same up on the wall for anyone who walks in. Item 2, I called the number on the listing for the apartments over on Millstone, the decent ones with the playground, and asked what it would take to hold a 2-bedroom deposit and first month, payable direct to the landlord, in Edith's name on Edith's lease. Not my couch. Not my 2nd bedroom. A floor of her own under her own feet, which is the one thing our family had never once thought to hand her. I closed the pad and sat there in my quiet house. They were coming on Sunday to make me choose between my house and my family. I had spent the week building a 3rd door, and I was reasonably sure nobody on that gravel had ever seen one. They came at 2 o'clock after church and lunch, 3 vehicles turning onto my gravel in a line like a procession. My mother's sedan washed for the occasion. Viv's SUV and the Pacifica, which told me the motel week had ended and the summit had been scheduled accordingly. My mother got out in her good lavender church suit, and that detail undid me a little. She had dressed up to come disown me or save me. In her mind, I truly believe those were the same errand. I met them in the yard at the picnic table Howard left behind between the house and the shop, and I did not invite anyone inside, and everyone registered it. The door I had not opened stood behind me the whole time like a witness. No coffee, no lemonade. This was not hospitality. It was a hearing. The second one my family had held on my property rights, and this time, at least, I would get to speak. Mom opened the way matriarchs open, not with an argument, but with a genealogy. Family is what is left when everything else has been taken. Wren, your grandmother took in her brothers every fall, every time. I myself took in Uncle Dale's girl for 2 years in the 90s and fed her and asked nothing. Now it is your turn. That is how she said it. It is your turn. Like the netting of falling relatives was a chore wheel hung in some eternal kitchen. This is how family works, she said, and spread her hands. Done. The way you rest a case that has never once been appealed. Behind her, Edith stood with her arms crossed, confident again. The kids sat on the porch steps of a house they had been promised. That was the field. Then came the shot. Viv went next because Viv is the network's loudspeaker, and every summit needs one. Everyone is watching this, Wren. The whole congregation, the whole family, your cousins in Brattleboro. Did I understand what it looked like? A woman alone in a big house while her sister's babies slept in a motor lodge. A big house, 2 bedrooms, and a gravel yard. But in the family's mythology, my little lot had already grown wings and a west wing. And then my mother stepped past her, closed the distance, and I watched her gather herself the way people do before they lift something they know is too heavy for them. Her voice shook, and I wanted on the record that the shake was real. She believed every word she was about to spend. "Open that door for your sister," she said, "or you are no daughter of mine." The yard went very quiet. Even Viv, who has never met a silence she did not fill. Theo looked up from the porch steps, 8 years old, listening to grown women decide what family means, and I thought, there it is. The whole machine dressed for church and pointed at my front door. Want and need, if you have been keeping score. Behind me, a house with one name on the deed. In front of me, my mother offering the last version of her love I would ever be offered, price sticker attached, and it was the old price. Everyone on that gravel believed there were only two doors I could walk through, hers or mine, and every face was set for one or the other. They had driven out in a convoy to watch me choose between them. I looked at my mother's shaking hands and at my sister's crossed arms, and I opened the third door instead. "No one is moving into my house," I said, and I said it quietly. And the quiet did more work than volume ever has. "This house is the first thing I ever built that nobody can take from me. It is not the family safety net. That job is closed." Viv started up. I raised one hand, ink still in the knuckle creases, and she stopped. Then I took the folder off the picnic table, the plain manila one I had set there before they arrived, and I laid it out for Edith item by item, the way I write an estimate, because an estimate is a kind of respect. A job at Aldinger Press, front counter, 25 hours a week to start, the wage posted on my wall, the same number Magdalene started at, so nobody could ever call it charity and nobody could ever call it a leash. And an apartment on Millstone, the two-bedroom with the playground below the window, deposit and first month already arranged with the landlord, payable direct, never touching her hands, on a lease with one name on it. Hers. "Your own floor," I said to my sister, "your own key, your own paycheck. Nobody carries you, and you never have to say thank you to anyone at Thanksgiving. One condition. From today, whatever passes between you and me is given. It is never again taken. You can earn a place here. You cannot claim one." Edith's arms came uncrossed. She looked at the folder, at me, and reached by pure reflex for the anthem. "You will be fine. You are always fine." I finally answered that sentence at last after 20 years of hearing it. "I was never fine, Edith. I was just useful. I stopped confusing the two." My mother's face closed like a store. She said if I let her walk off this yard, she would not come back. And her voice broke on the word daughter somewhere in there. And I am not going to pretend to you that it did not cut. It cut all the way down. "I know," I said very softly. "I am not closing the door, Mom. I am just done being the door everyone walks through." She looked at me for a long moment, my mother in her lavender suit in her 63rd year. And then she turned and walked to her sedan and drove off my gravel. And that sound, tires rolling slow over stone, is the sound the price of your life makes when it is finally being paid. Viv followed her out, of course, pausing only to tell me she would pray for me in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. And then the yard was just us. Edith, the kids on the steps, me, and a manila folder on a picnic table with the late afternoon sun coming across it. Nobody spoke. Mabry climbed down and pulled at her mother's hand. Tired, done with the theater, the way only a 5-year-old can be honestly done. Edith stood there a long time looking at that folder. And I watched my sister do math she had never been taught, weighing a couch she was owed against a floor she would have to earn. She did not apologize. "I want to be straight with you." There was no hallway movie moment, no hug, no tears in the gravel. She picked up the folder without meeting my eyes, the way you take a printer's invoice you cannot argue with, got her kids buckled and drove away slower than she had ever left anywhere. She did not say yes, but she did not leave it on the table either. And with Edith, that was the closest thing to yes I had ever been handed. I sat on my porch steps until the light went copper, listening to my press cool down and my house do nothing at all except stand there. Mine. Monday morning at 2 minutes to 8, I heard tires on the gravel and a belt squealing, and I put on a fresh pot of coffee. She came in hard-faced and on time, and she worked badly at first, then less badly. She double-booked the foil press her first week, and I corrected her the same way I corrected Magdalene, flat, specific, once, and she looked at me waiting for the rest of it, the lecture, the interest on the favor, and it never came because there was no favor. There was a posted wage and a job being done. 2 weeks in, I handed the paychecks across the counter. Magdalene's, then hers. Same envelope, same payday. She held hers a long time. First money of her whole life, I would bet anything that nobody owed her, gave her, or slid to her under a table to keep the family tidy. She said one thing, not looking up. Finn never once told me the rent was due until it was already late. That was all. It was not an apology. It was a bearing seating itself, and I just nodded and let it seat, because some repairs you do not interrupt. That same month, the bank finished with Marsh letterpress, and the equipment crossed the auction block on a cold morning. I bought the good Heidelberg Platen through the online sale at market price against strangers, paid in full that afternoon, and sent a hauler for it rather than walk that floor myself. There was nothing over there I needed to see, and nothing I needed to say. And if Cale was watching the sale from somewhere, what he saw from me was a fair price and silence. Read the fine print. It works in every direction. That is the whole point of the sign. It has been 4 months since the Sunday on the gravel, and here is where everything actually stands. No bows on it. Edith is still at the counter, 25 hours a week, better at it than either of us expected, sharp with the schedule, murder on a double booking. She rents the Millstone 2-bedroom, her name on the lease, and she paid the second month herself. And the third. And she is chipping at that old collection debt out of her own checks. No miracles, just installments, which is how real people actually climb. Saturdays, Theo and Mabry do their homework at the waiting room table, and Theo has fallen in love with my father's composing stick in the corner of Bay 1. Last week, I let him tighten his first form lock, hand over hand on the wrench, his tongue out sideways with concentration, and I heard my dad's voice come out of my own mouth. Snug is enough, kiddo. Tight does not mean stripped. Ezra Aldinger would have liked that boy. My mother has not called. A Christmas card came to the house in December, her shaky hand signed, Mom, no apology, no questions. And I did with it what I do. I put it on the refrigerator and I mailed nothing back but a card of my own, signed Wren. No apology, no questions. The door is not locked, it just does not swing one way anymore. Viv still tells the story her way at First Methodist. I still lose the odd customer over it. And the press room is still booked 2 months out because the special collections department does not care about my reputation. They care about their bindings. Edith and I do not hug. We talk about the schedule, the paper stock, her kids, foil stamping dies. Once in a while she says something almost like the beginning of the courtroom conversation, and I let it start, and let it stop wherever it stops. We are not what we were. We are something smaller and cleaner, and it holds weight. And in this family, that makes it the strongest thing anyone has built in 3 generations. Saturday at closing time, this is how it goes now. Edith counts the drawer, shuts down the register, and drives her kids home to her own apartment where her own key opens her own door. Mabry waves at me through the back glass the whole way down the driveway, and I wave back until they are gone. I lock the shop, check the bay doors, rest my hand flat on my dad's composing stick for a second, an old habit now, and walk the 30 steps across the gravel to my own house, where my key, on its plain steel ring, opens the door to rooms that answer to one name. The kitchen light comes on. The furnace ticks. 2 women from the same factory, each standing on her own floor for the first time in either of their lives. Close enough to wave, far enough to stand. Here is what I know now, and it cost me a mother to learn it. So take it free of charge. Love that has to be paid like a debt is not love. And the day you stop being everyone's safety net is the day you finally find out who is even holding a net for you. I want to tell you the part nobody saw, because the rallies and the laydowns and the closing day are the scenes people retell, but the part in the middle, the part that does the actual building, is the part that gets skipped, and it is the part I am proudest of. For 3 years there was no audience, there were no witnesses, there were no Saturday drives and no Sunday summits. There was a woman, a van, a hand-painted sign on the side of the van that read Aldinger Press, and a stack of paper stock that had to be carried in from the back lot by hand every Monday morning because I had not earned the credit line for a forklift yet. There were Tuesdays. I sat on the floor of the van with the tailgate up eating a cheese sandwich I had packed at 5 a.m. and thought, this is the version of me that nobody in the family will ever describe at a funeral. This is the version that does not get a card. This is the version that has to be enough. It was enough. I want to give you 3 small scenes from those 3 years so you can feel the texture of the rebuild, because the rebuild is what this script is about. Not the courtroom, not the porch. The rebuild. First scene. The Underwood. A widow on a back road outside Stowe called me because nobody else would take the project. Her husband's 1920s typewriter, the one he had courted her with, was jammed. The spacebar had given up. The ribbon spool had surrendered. 2 shops in Burlington had told her it could not be fixed. The 3rd shop had told her it could be rebuilt for a price she could not afford. She called me from the kitchen table, crying, and I drove 60 miles in the van that night because the headlights worked and hers did not. I sat on her porch at 8 p.m. with my dad's tool roll, took the machine apart in the order my father had taught me, cleaned each part with a rag, found the issue in the escapement, reassembled the body, readjusted the ribbon, and typed the line "Test." The Underwood across a fresh sheet and slid it out and handed it to her. She read it. She did not say I am grateful. She said, he would like that. I told her $40 for the parts plus an hour, and she wrote me a check for $100 and told me to keep the change. The $60 she had overpaid me went into the savings taped to the dashboard. That is how the savings got climbed, $60 at a time, from real women, in real kitchens, on real porches. By the real headlights of a real van, I had fixed myself. Second scene. The hymnal. A minister's wife in Marshfield had been carrying her grandmother's hymnal to church every Sunday in a tote bag because the binding had split. She had owned the book for 47 years. She had been told by the church librarian that it could not be rebound without losing the gilt on the spine. The gilt is what she said mattered to her, the way my own father's composing stick had mattered to me. I told her I would rebind it by hand with linen-wrapped boards and regild the spine in a way that matched. She mailed it to me in a flat box wrapped in tissue. I worked on it 3 nights and a Sunday. I messaged her pictures at each stage. When I finished, I mailed it back with a typed letter explaining the build, the linen, the redrying time, the gilt. She received it, and she called me on a Thursday and read me her grandmother's favorite hymn over the phone and sang it badly because she has been crying through the song for 30 years, and bad singing was the closest she could get to the original. I told her the rebuild was $90, parts and labor. She sent me $90 and a sticky note that said, "May your margins hold." The line was the second $60 that did not exist yet because I had just put it on the dashboard. The margins she was praying for became my margins because the margins were the same. Third scene, the university. The collections manager at a small liberal arts college south of Montpellier called me on a Friday afternoon at 4:30, which is how you know it is urgent. He had a stack of letters from a 1920s alumnus whose widow had donated them, and the collection had to be processed, indexed, and archivally rehoused before the school's accreditation review, which was on Wednesday. He had been told by 3 other binders in the state that the timeline was impossible. I told him I would quote him a real number and a real timeline. The number was reasonable, the timeline was not. I told him I would not meet his Wednesday deadline, but I would meet his Sunday one if he could let me keep the material overnight Saturday. He agreed. Saturday I drove to the campus at 6 a.m. and laid out the materials on long tables in the workroom under the museum, and I worked 18 hours on the floor in order, cleaning, deslitting, refolding, rehousing, indexing by hand on numbered sheets, and at 11 p.m. I drove home. Sunday I finished. Sunday afternoon I delivered. The accreditation team walked in on Monday and did not notice that the collection had been rehoused by a single woman in a 4 a.m. unheated workroom in a borrowed pair of gloves. That is the level of the rebuild. That is what paying what things cost looks like at 4:30 on a Friday when the binder said no. That was me in year 2 before the university contract came over as a standing account. I tell you these 3 scenes because you cannot build a deed if you cannot build the small things that make the deed real. I could not have done the closing day in September if I had not done the Underwood. I could not have paid the $33,000 gap on my own if I had not earned the $13,000 worth of skilled trust that the hymnal and the Underwood and the university job represented. The deed was the receipt for the small nights. The deed was not the feat. The deed was the sum. So when I say I want you to notice that I believed distance was the same thing as safety, I want you to also see that I built the wrong thing the first 2 of those 3 years. I built a van. I built a list. I built a calendar of women who owed me $60 in spirit. I built a kind of safe distance. And in a way, distance was the right move because Kale still lived on Bank Street, and Edith still lived on her mother-in-law's couch, and Rowan still mailed a $20 in every October, and all I had to do was keep driving, and the family would not know where to find me. Distance did keep me safe from another courtroom. It did not keep me safe from the moment when Edith would arrive on my lawn, and when she arrived, she would not feel like a betrayal. She would feel like a sister with 2 kids on a porch in the rain, asking for a door. Distance is what you build when you do not yet have anything to defend. Distance is the cheapest boundary. It is also the laziest, because the day something real surfaces, the day a deed whose name is yours is printed, and a gravel yard is yours, and a van that says Aldinger Press is parked in Bay 1, distance does not work anymore, because distance means a driveway with no witness, and a deed means a driveway with an audience. I learned this the morning of the Pacifica, and you will too, someday, when your body of work meets your people's appetite for it. I want to put these 3 scenes in your hands because they are the load-bearing timber of the rebuild people do not talk about. The Underwood, the hymnal, the university. These are the things that taught my hands to ask for what they were worth. They are the things that taught my mouth to give an honest number without flinching. They are the things that made me a person my father would have recognized in his shop. Some people rebuild in capital. Some people rebuild in relationships. I rebuilt in craft. And craft has a payback. It pays you back in the hands. You set a typeface in the morning, you read it in the afternoon, and at 11 p.m. you do it again. And at some point your eye begins to know what a clean press looks like without being told, the way my father trained mine without ever raising his voice. Rebuild, regardless of the currency you choose, is the slow apprenticeship to yourself. And if you are in a rebuild, what currency are you apprenticing to? Are you apprenticing to your body, to your eye, to your mouth when it speaks for itself, to your hands when they set what cannot be undone? Drop it in the comments beside the word stitch, because I want this rebuild community to be a place where we mark what we are really building. And then, after the rebuild currency, comes the last piece of currency I want to mention before I close this script, which is the currency most rebuilders skip because it is the most painful. Time. Time to wait for the family to see the boundary, and to either love it or lose you. Time to lose the customers who do not stick. Time to sit on a porch at 1 a.m. and read Rowan's $20 checks back to her, uncashed, and not know what to put on the back of her envelope. Time to wait for an old man to keep coming on Tuesdays, or to not come. Time to wait for your sister to take the bus home from a job you gave her. Time. 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 Time is the ink I worked in. It cost me a grandmother who had buried one brother and held the next. It cost me a baby nephew named after me I had not yet met. It cost me a Thanksgiving. Grace I used to be at the head of, and now I say at home alone with my hand on the spine of my father's composing stick. Time is what I bought when I bought the deed. Time is the cost my mother charged when she charged the ultimatum, and time was the thing I was buying when I read out the third door solution and waited for the cell phone signal to come back inside Viv's SUV as she backed out of my gravel and slammed her door. You cannot hurry time. You can only hand it. And that is the rebuild. That is my story. One deed with one name on it. One sister earning her way back a paycheck at a time. And one door that still does not open for anyone who will not knock first. If you have ever been the strong one, protect what you built and take today as your sign. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next.